Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. It's June 8th, 2015. Some of you might notice, and I announced it the other night, that we're going back through some of our old and most favorite or most watched webinars so that we can put them under the new look of Evoke. And so for me, it's really exciting because I get to do some of my favorite webinars. And this might be my very favorite. There are a lot that are right up near the top. But for me, this was actually a lesson that I learned as I participated as a wilderness therapist, and I'm going to talk about that tonight. And then something I learned as I participated in the parent phone calls over the years that I think is a really critical point in my parent education. I want to start off with this quote from Dr. Paul Goddard, a therapist at our program at Entrada. And he said, I heard him say in a meeting one time, to the extent you try to control your children, you fail at influencing them. Paul Goddard. And that really is where we start. This idea that how can we have an impact on our child? How can we make a difference? How can we influence them without engaging in the spiritual, psychological power struggle of trying to control them? And so there is in this discussion, and that's why it's a little bit complex. That's why a lot of parents will ask me for more examples or be confused about it. So be patient with this as I go through this and try to absorb the idea, this seeming dichotomy between having an influence on our children and trying to control them. As a parent educator over the years, of course, I started off talking about healthy parenting principles and healthy systemic principles. But it wasn't long that I realized that something implied in what I was saying suggested that if you do it right, that your child's going to change. Right? That somehow I was giving children or parents, that is, this magic formula to be able to change their children. So then I moved to this place of saying, well, it's not about your child and you're just parenting in a healthy way. And then I started to ask myself, but what's the outcome? What's the outcome of healthy parenting? And what I started to learn, of course, is that healthy parenting changed the parent. It changed the parent in all their relationships. And that change can have a powerful and profound impact on children and on families. So, like I always talk and teach, healthy parenting is its own reward. Healthy parenting makes a powerful change in the life of the parent. It means being a healthier person. It means being a healthier friend, a healthier boss or employee or coworker or associate or a child. And so that's the goal here, is to be the healthiest you can be, and then watch what kind of impact that kind of living can have on a child. It's not a simple cause and effect, because when we reduce it to cause and effect, when we say, if I do this, then you will do this, we're turning that other person, the second person in that equation, into an object. So that's where how I've kind of evolved in this process. As I started to do parent groups, what I heard, of course, was a lot of parents feeling blamed through this process, feeling like when I talk about or when we teach healthy parenting principles, that there's this suggestion that they didn't do it right and that it's their fault. And this sense of blame, which I think is more than just understanding responsibility and accountability, but is laced with this kind of shame, that it led parents not to be motivated. It led parents to retreat. It led parents often to tell me and talk to me about how well they had done. Because that was the other side of the equation, right? I kept hearing people saying, well, I've tried this and I've tried that, and this is what we did. And so what I learned was they must be hearing me say you did something wrong, and you need to feel bad about that. So there's a sense of blame that comes out of us. A lot of times, for parents, the challenge is we're trying to avoid pain and help our children avoid pain. And the empathic pain or misery that we feel as we connect to our children is so intolerable at times. Maybe one of the most difficult feelings for a human being to feel is to watch their child suffer or get hurt. And so we have to learn how to accept pain, value it, go through it, and understand that pain and difficulty are the other side of the equation of love and joy. That pain is evidence that we're still alive, right? That we're still living because we're feeling something, and that there is great value and meaning that can be gleaned from or that can be come out of our pain. So that's an important part of it. Also, of course, this feeling of powerlessness for parents. They feel powerless because they can't change the thing they want to change. They're not focusing on the thing that they can, which is themselves, right? I want to save my child. I want to help my child. So there's an inherent powerlessness in that, because in reality, logically, you can't make somebody do something. You can't control them, not ultimately. And then I think there was this disempowering feeling that they felt because they were always walking on eggshells, right? If I do the wrong thing, it blows up. It's like walking through a minefield. And again, that focuses on or comes from a focus on paying attention to the outcome. I was talking to a mother just the other night, going through with her several possible options in an interaction with her child. And every one that she shared with me, she anticipated the potential explosion or the dead end at the end of it. And as we went through that entire process, what I came to suggest to her or to offer to her is you're paying so much attention to what could happen, you might be right, that you're really disempowering yourself. And you're trying to control the end instead of looking at your intentions, looking at your honesty, looking at your integrity, looking at your authenticity, looking at your clarity. And that's where we need to focus, and that's going to give you a sense of hope. And of course, there's fear. And fear is one of the great blocks to creativity. I tell the story of my son, who's an artist, where a teacher stopped him halfway through his painting, asked what he was doing because he was kind of fiddling around with it. And my son said, I'm afraid that I'm going to ruin it. I'm pretty pleased where it's at, but I know there's more work to be done, but I'm afraid. Then the teacher said, of course, here's your assignment. I want you to ruin this painting. Keep painting it until you ruin it. And the lesson that she was trying to give him was the same lesson that applies to all of our creativity, to all of our resourcefulness, is that when we are afraid, we often lose access to our creativity, to our wisdom, to all of our resources. So we need to be wary and manage our fear. That's why it's important for parents to practice mindfulness. That's why it's important for them to work on their anxiety by going to meetings. That's why it's important for them to go to therapy, to own their fear and anxiety. Because when we can manage that, we're much more capable in responding to situations with clarity, and specifically in the relationship with our child, with an awareness and attention to what they need instead of what we might be afraid of. So why focus on parents? Because it adds inner peace and empowerment. This is really the same message that we give to your children in many ways. You've heard the phrase parallel process. There is a parallel process between working with your child and working with you, and then even working with myself, right? If I am starting to participate in our relationship, me with the parent and the family, in the same way that I'm asking you not to with your child, then I'm not modeling it very well. I'm not really teaching it well. So there are parallels all throughout. That's why it's my opinion that any therapist that is really good at what they do is doing their own work. Whether that's going to meetings, doing a lot of their own personal work and program, going to therapy and so forth. So it brings us a sense of peace and empowerment. Same message to your children. There's this idea where we think, I'm going to meet you halfway. You've heard that phrase. We've used that phrase before. Meet me halfway. I'm going to meet you halfway. And my response is, you got to meet them all the way. When people agree to meet each other halfway, they usually end up about 48% of the way and then arguing with the other person about coming the rest of the way. So it's important to understand that we do this work. We become accountable. We learn how to communicate better. We look at our own history as parents. We look at our own addictive patterns. We look at our own enabling, rescuing, codependent patterns. We look at our own rage. We look at our avoidance technique. We look at all of that. And we offer, to the best of our ability, that kind of vulnerability to our children. And we don't do it expecting something in return. We don't get healthier when our children is at a vote so that our child will get healthier. We don't stop drinking when our child is a drug addict or an alcoholic because then that will make them not drink. We stop drinking because it's not healthy for us. Right? We do our work because it's healthy for us. We don't do it. We don't get better. We don't get healthier so that guarantees or suggests that they need to make some kind of change or that they're obligated. So we meet them all the way. We go all the way. We do all of this work. That's the ideal. That's what we're striving for. And in the end, and when I'm talking with parents, I think to myself often when they're asking me questions and they're feeling very anxious during a critical or a crisis point, I say, there's a possibility that the worst possible outcome could be here. So with that, at any point, and I'm not talking about tonight or tomorrow, I'm talking about in the long run, right? Horrible outcomes. With that awareness that could occur in any of our children's lives, it's important that we do it from a place of inner awareness and peace. because that's going to give us the greatest comfort. And if it turns out well, that'll be a wonderful thing to adjust to. And if it turns out poorly, that means we have to have done the best that we can. Really asked ourselves difficult questions. Really searched our mind and our hearts for what was going on and where it was coming from. And that's really all we can do in this process. And like I said, acting from that place oftentimes leads to us having a profound impact on our children. An important question to ask yourself is, what is in the way of me knowing my truth? There is where your work lies. That's from Journey of the Heroic Parent. That's what that means right there, the JHP. So it's this idea that what gets in the way? Why don't you know? Right? Why don't I know in a given moment what the answer is, what the right thing, if you will, for me to do is in this relationship? And when I can start to look at what I'm being blocked by, what's getting in the way, it's my fear of the outcome. It's my fear of getting hurt. It's my fear of failure. It's my fear of I won't be showing you that I love you, or I won't be fair. Then I've got some work to do. Oftentimes, I'm trying to repair the relationship with my child. I'm trying to repair the relationship in my childhood with my child, right? I want them to feel the love that I never felt. I never felt as loved as I could have. So I need to somehow communicate that to them. And somehow through doing that, I won't turn out to be the father, the mother that I had. I won't turn out to be the person that wounds them the way that I was wounded or hurt. So it's important that we understand what's getting in the way of our truth. What's getting in the way of us finding out our answer. There's this idea in psychology that the solution and the problem is not out there, and the question is not out there. And I just took several quotes that I use to illustrate that. The first one from Gandhi. I want to show the people that the only devils worth fighting are the ones running around in their own hearts. Carl Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves. From the King James New Testament, and why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that is in thine own eye? First cast out the beam out of thine own eye, and then shalt thou see clearly to cast out the mote out of thy brother's eye. From Gahil Gibran the prophet, your children are not your children. Seek not to make them like you, but seek to be like them. And then from the Systemic Training and Effective Parenting, the greatest challenge in parenting teens is to focus on yourself, not your teenager. So I could have listed 100 similar quotes from philosophers, scholars, religious leaders, and it would say the same thing. These problems, this thing that we're calling parenting, is really about finding ourselves and getting more clear. And when we, or as we, get more and more clear, we really have all the questions in our lives answered in all of our relationships. From the Journey of the Heroic Parent, no matter the story, the heroic journey is always inward. And so all of these great stories, all of these great movies that we talk about, and I share this all the time, we have this idea that this person is going to accomplish this fantastic feat or find this wonderful treasure. But what we find in all these stories is that it is a story of going inward, of self-discovery, of battling our own demons, our own dragons inward. That it's not out there, that evil or good or solutions or problems are not out there, but they're really in here to be fought, to be looked at, and to be healed. The Serenity Prayer is another great example. And this is said at the end of almost all 12-step meetings. God, or you can put in there whatever word you want, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I highlight this all the time. Can we stay focused? Can we stay aware in a given moment what we can and can't control? That's part of why the I feel statement, that last part that we put in there, that's why it's helpful. Because we're trying to remember where we stop and where the other person starts. And what is your business and what is not your business? What is your problem to solve and what is not your problem to solve? I remember years ago I was talking to the parent of a young adult. This was during an inquiry call. And the mother was talking to me about she lived back east and her son lived in Arizona, and he was dealing with DUIs and a car problem and not having a license and getting a job. And I kept asking, I said, so tell me about your struggle, tell me about your dilemma. And she would go on to tell me about the struggle of her son. and about all the problems. And should I get him a car? What should I do? How should I provide for him? He can't get to work. And after a while, I simply said, gently said, it doesn't sound like these are your problems. It sounds like these are his problems. He's in his mid-20s, and it sounds like he's got some issues. And I wasn't insensitive to the fact that this mother loved and wanted to help and provide support for her son. But she was definitely of the mindset that his problems were becoming her problems. And that happens for a lot of us. We get focused. I use the word obsessed at times because we can't stop thinking about it. We get focused at solving our child's addiction, solving our child's mental health issues, solving our child's daily problem issues, right? And even for young adults, I know those of you who have adolescent children say, well, I'm more responsible for my 15-year-old than I am for my 25-year-old. That's true. But there are parallels. There are places where we set that pattern, where we set the seeds of trying to solve problems. It happens with the youngest of children, right? I have now, my youngest child is 7 years old. I can still engage in rescuing behaviors, in trying to solve a problem that's not mine. That is hers. So it's important that we think about this pattern and how it applies to our children, no matter what the age. So to distinguish between controlling parenting versus influential parenting, the difference, of course, is manage the outcome, right? If I set a consequence or a boundary or a limit, and I let go of what you choose, in so much that I don't try to coerce you into it, but just let you choose what you're going to choose and have with it the consequence, the limit, the boundary that I've set up. That's not controlling, that's influential. If I tried to coerce and steer you and guide you and guilt you and nag you into the solution after I've set the boundary and the consequence, then I'm controlling. So it's the difference between managing the intention and the intervention and the reaction or the choice that the child makes. Of course, in this, there's this codependent foundation. Codependency sometimes has this nice, warm connotation, right? It suggests that we love too much. I've heard people describe it that way. I like to playfully remind codependent people that they're control freaks. I use that on myself. I'll say to a codependent mother or father, you're one of the nicest, most pleasant control freaks that I've ever met. And I'm trying to highlight and really strip away the flowers and the roses and the butterflies from the fact that this is really about somebody trying to control another person, and that their self-esteem, their anxiety, their serenity is all tied up in that person's success or not. There's a certain kind of mindfulness and patience and detachment that we need to practice. Detachment meaning, of course, that we need to connect to the person in a healthy way. Detachment in this case is the exact same thing as connection. So we need to pull away enough to see them and not to be over-involved, enough to not be over-identified. There is this intrapsychic foundation, meaning that the more we can make sense out of our feelings and thoughts, the more we can understand where our choices come from, the more we can understand our beliefs, the meaning that we make out of life, the more clearly we are going to be able to make decisions from a flexible perspective instead of a reactive perspective. As we move away from control and into influence, we move away from fear and into a place of faith or love. Right? Love isn't warm and fuzzy. Love is courageous. Love tolerates pain. Love is patient. It's all those difficult things. Love stretches us. It transforms us. And I think most of us think about love as sonnets and chocolates and flowers and sweet whisperings and hugs and all. That's part of it, right? But that's not all of it. It's the tough stuff. It's the tears. It's the pain. It's the personal work. It's all that stuff. And I think having this idea, this belief in a higher power, that the universe, that God, whatever your name is, hasn't forgotten you. That what is what's supposed to be. It is presented to you as a lesson, as an opportunity, as your classroom. That having your child at Evoke, having a child who's addicted, having a child who is struggling with mental health, and I mean this with all the respect that I can muster, that circumstance is what your life is supposed to be. And so when you realize what it's supposed to be, then you can activate in you the strength and the courage to match it. Instead of simply complaining or worrying or fixating on what should be. There's a point to grieve it, right? And there's a point to say, now, my higher power hasn't forgotten me. The universe hasn't forgotten me. This is not some kind of detour from the way that life should be. So what do I do? What do I learn from this? How can I grow? So that when a therapist asks you at Evoke or somewhere else, what have you learned? How have you grown? You have an answer. I've learned patience. I've learned how controlling I am. I've learned how afraid I am. I've learned how to be responsible for my own anxiety and to find peace and serenity at moments when I believe the lie of fear. Right? We start to name those things, name those lessons, and pay attention to them. When we're paying attention to what should be, what should have been, it's going to be pretty hard for us to make sense out of or make use out of the lessons that are being provided for us by the teacher. It's not a measure. This is really important. This is where I came to. And this is kind of the core lesson here. Control and influence are not measures of structure and strictness, but of emotional coercion. And that's what I came to realize, is that I saw children in wilderness therapy adjust, thrive to an increased level of structure, strictness, rules in their life in wilderness therapy. I saw that. I saw them happy. I saw them talking about feeling free and liberated under this increased structure. And what I started to realize was it wasn't about the level of structure or rules, but it was about the fact they were allowed to feel. And that they weren't responsible for the adults that they were around, for them being happy, feeling happy about themselves and about life. So let's talk about control. Control is emotionally coercive. It's me trying to guilt, nag, threaten, intimidate, frighten, right? Shame, all of those things, trying to get you to do it. And that's why it's so important that we're careful and clear about our language and our communication. Should I tell my child how much this costs? Should I tell my child how many days of work I lost? Should I tell my child how sad, how difficult it was for me to sleep? All of those questions first need to look at, why are you telling them? And we need to be careful of, am I telling you to try to make you feel responsible for my life, for my happiness, for my sadness, for my hurt? And if you are, you're falling on the side of coercion, right? You're trying to guilt or shame, intimidate, fear, so on and so forth. Instead of saying, this is somebody who loves you. This is what's going on for me. I want you to be aware of it, this impact, because I want you to ask yourself questions. I think you've lost some sight of things, and I think this might help. So there's a subtlety there. Controlling is rigid. There's not a flexibility. The interesting thing is I teach parents, and I can identify with this. Our rigidness is exposed when we can't adjust to a slightly different situation, right? When we lose the ability to generalize the principle that we've learned or that we've even put in place in the last circumstance. So there's a rigidness, right? Everything is always this way. Give me a rule, Brad. Tell me the way that it's supposed to be. And say, well, there's a principle here, right? And while right now, I say this to the staff all the time, there might be times when students are swearing where you're going to just listen to them. There might be times when children are swearing where you're going to say, hey guys, that's not appropriate. Here's the consequence for swearing. Those both can work. And we can adjust because, again, we're principle-based instead of rule-based, right? So there's a rigidness. There's a polarization. There's an extremeness to controlling parenting. And of course, there's an enmeshment, an over-identification. What you feel is what I feel. Your pain is my pain. My sadness is your sadness. My pain is your pain. On and on. I lose track of you because you and I are so marbled together, if you will, that I can't see you clearly. And then that becomes a huge barrier. And we learned that level of emotional proximity from our family of origin. Let me say that again. We learned, all of us, the level of emotional proximity from our family of origin. Even though stylistically it might be different. One family might have a lot more anger and reactivity. One might have a lot more classic enmeshment and enabling. There still is a level of awareness of who am I and who are you and how do we connect? And how are we separate? So enmeshment is an important critical part of this controlling relationship. And then, of course, we're reactive. And reactiveness can look like, again, it can look like anger or pulling away and getting cold. It can look like over functioning, overcompensating. Or it can look like, I give up, I'm done. It's not thoughtful. It comes from a place of extreme emotions, and it's not flexible. It doesn't have what Daniel Siegel calls response flexibility from the book Parenting from the Inside Out. We look for balance outside of ourselves. I know most of this stuff because I've done it and I do it. And that means that I look to solve the equation outside of me. I'm looking to try to change the behavior oftentimes of my co-parent or of my child or of my co-parent through my child by trying to get them to change. Instead of finding and looking inside and finding balance, I'm trying to create balance between me and you or between me and the other. So control looks for that solution, that balance outside of oneself. I want to control your addiction. I want to control your codependency. I want to control your enmeshment. I joke about the fact that I think books on codependency are the most recommended books that I ever come across. Because, of course, the people reading them, the codependent people, always think, oh, I know a few people who could use this. Because we look for that balance outside of ourselves, because it's a lot harder to find balance inside of ourselves. Blurred boundaries, just another way of saying, don't know where I stop and you start. Don't know what I'm responsible for. I believe things like you make me feel. I don't necessarily believe that I make you feel something, but I believe that you make me feel things and think things. I believe that as a parent, if I'm happy and worried, or if I'm happy or worried about you, then that's about you, and it's not. Those are examples of blurred boundaries. This idea that we do about everything short of setting a boundary, so we don't have to execute a boundary, because boundaries are scary. We threaten, intimidate, undervalue choice in our children. We put too much energy, we overfunction, overcompensate, or we become punitive, and I can go on and on and on. We do this as alternatives for boundaries. Boundary, people, even I can see it in people, they'll talk about boundaries a lot, right? If you talk about boundaries a lot with your child or with the person that you're struggling with to set boundaries with, there's a sign there that you might not be setting boundaries. You might be talking about them in the hopes that you can convince them to agree with you, convince them not to engage in the behavior that would require you to set boundaries, right? That they might understand where you're coming from, so you don't have to make the most difficult decision of all, which is to set a boundary, which leads to that frightening experience of being alone. Boundaries are difficult. This stuff is easier. Talking about boundaries, teaching about boundaries, lecturing about boundaries, philosophizing about boundaries, those aren't boundaries. And like I said before, we're oftentimes working through our family of origin issues. So often, almost every day, I'm working with a parent where I can see they're trying to heal a wound from their childhood. When I see parents trying so hard to get their child to feel loved, it's not, we all love our children. I've said this. I never knew I could love as much as I love my children. I love my children more than I love, or as much as I love anybody, right? That's just the way that it is for me, so I can relate to it. But when I see parents obsessed with trying to get their child to feel that love, they're really doing it for them, not for the child. And the child can feel that smothering sensation. They don't know where it comes from. They don't know that feeling comes from the parent experiencing some grief, some missing piece from their own childhood, right? I want you to come home. I don't want you to feel punished. I want you to think that we're still there for you. All of those things, those are okay desires for us to have. But there are times when it becomes quite obvious that those aren't about the child. And they aren't about the child's needs, but they're about your needs, about the parent's needs. And then, of course, you lose focus, like I've said, on what is your business and what is not your business when it comes to your child. What is your choice? What is your decision? What part of the equation is yours? What side of the street is you on? My wife said to me this morning, we were having a playful moment, and she says that, and she borrows this statement from Al-Anon. She says, stay on your side of the street. And I said, but your side of the street is so clear from my side of the street, I can see it perfectly. And we laughed about that. Children can adjust to high levels of structure. I've seen them thrive within very strict structures. What they often cannot adjust to is the parent who tries to impose a belief, opinion, philosophy, or feeling onto his child. So let's contrast this feeling, this idea of controlling with influential parenting. It comes from self-awareness. It comes from being honest with oneself. Right? Our self-awareness is higher in those moments when we're acting in an influential way. I own my feelings. I own my life. I own my sleep, my eating, my alcohol consumption, my addiction to the computer and my screens. I own all of that. I own my rage. I own my aggressiveness. I own my struggle with my spouse or my ex-spouse. I own all of that. That's where influential parenting starts, is self-awareness and ownership. I focus on self-regulation when I'm being influential. It's my priority. Not my focus, my emphasis in an interaction. And when I share it with my therapist or with a friend or somebody that I trust, is not going to be on what my child or did or didn't do. It's going to be on how I responded to it, how I regulated myself. It's assertive. It's not passive. It's brave. It shows a willingness to feel pain, discomfort, anxiety. Sometimes it doesn't talk at all. Sometimes it just listens. It doesn't give a lot of advice. It doesn't give a lot of solutions, especially those that are unasked for, that are uninvited. It shows a striving toward balance instead of rigidity. And it also shows a connection, an ability to see the other. Connection, folks, is often misunderstood. Again, connection often is believed to be, or in that same family, of feelings as love, warmth, and kindness, and all of those warm and fuzzy things. And that is a part of it, of course. But connection also hurts. Connection means that I don't try to control you. I don't try to solve the problem. When you hurt, I just listen. When you're sad, I just listen. When you're frustrated or upset, I just listen. I'm not triggered. I don't react. I don't explain myself. I don't try to make it better. I don't try to explain it away. That's what connection is. Influential parenting values autonomy and learning from choices. And again, that takes a certain kind of willingness to feel. And influential parenting makes serenity, peace, clarity your project, not your child's project. There's no virtue in telling your child how much you suffer over their behavior. There's no virtue in telling your child you can't sleep or eat or think or work, right? There's no great virtue in that. That's just telling them to feel responsible for what other people feel and experience in their life. And while in some situations it might seem that that's okay because the behavior is obviously objectively insane or dangerous, in the big picture, that's not a healthy process for parenting or being raised, that is. We learn to let go and trust ourselves as parents by focusing on our intentions, feelings, and objectives rather than obsessing over whether our actions will accomplish those objectives. I was looking through my book tonight on Kindle, and this was the most highlighted quote in the book by anybody who had bought it online, according to my Kindle. So it's this idea that we learn to focus on our intentions and not necessarily what's going to be accomplished by it. It's this dialectical idea that I'll do the best that I can, and then I'll let go of the outcome. And yet my outcome is I want to provide the best thing for my child. And how can I hold those things at the same time in my mind? It's a really powerful and challenging thing. This little axis, X and Y axis block that I've created here is to highlight the idea between controlling versus influential parenting. There's this idea that there are two continuums. There's a strict and a permissive continuum. And that you can be controlling and permissive or controlling and strict. You can be influential and permissive or influential and strict. In fact, a lot of people over the years have suggested that these are the same continuum. And what I have learned is that most permissive parents are controlling. Most permissive parents are controlling. In fact, I just might argue that the permissive and the strict end of the continuum are the unhealthy ones. And of course, the controlling are the unhealthy ones. So it's not defined by your level of strictness, not defined by your choice, by your boundary. It's defined by your emotional and spiritual and psychological relationship with your child and their problems, which starts off with your relationship with yourself. So strict is not controlling, permissive is not influential. It's more complex than that. And the examples I give, and I've given these before, but I'll give them again. When I was dealing with a young woman and her family who she had an eating disorder, and I was coaching the mother to set boundaries around the level of potassium that her daughter had during her tests and her weight and how much time that she had to spend at the kitchen table after eating, and if she could go be on the cheer squad or if she could have her car, go to a dance, all of this. I was talking about behavioral aspects. The same way you might set limits and boundaries around somebody who's a drug addict, among other things, right? And as I was doing this, a mother interrupted me because they'd been to a lot of experts in the area of eating disorders, and she said, Brad, you don't understand. Eating disorders are based on control, power, and control. So if we do that stuff, we're just engaging the eating disorder in power and control. And I corrected this mother and quoted her accurately. And I said, it's not controlling to tell her that she can't use the car if her potassium level is not at a certain level. What is controlling is when you tell her that she's disgusting. When you tell her that no man is ever going to love her. When you tell her that you would have never done this to your mother. That's controlling. Boundaries are boundaries. But the emotional coercion is something that is going to be hard for her to survive. I remember years ago, I had staff who was brand new and excited and energetic. And after we were camping in this one area and the students weren't really following some of the protocol, they were walking all over the plants and the cryptobiotic soil, which is this very delicate soil that is the foundation for life in the desert. So they approached me, the staff did, and said, can I share an I feel statement with the group about the cryptobiotic soil and about them walking all over things? Because they're supposed to walk in single file lines from their shelter to the cooking area. And they were just kind of walking all, not paying attention. And I said, what's your goal? Why do you want to share a feeling statement about the soil? And the staff said to me, because I want them to stop walking on it. I want them to respect the earth and where we are. I said, well, let's set a boundary. I said, it's okay to give an I feel statement, but that can't be all of it, right? It's not their job to believe what you believe about the earth, to feel what you feel. But we can pack up camp and move, right? That can be the way that we teach them. We can go to a place that has less vegetation, less cryptobiotic soil, and they're going to dislike that. That's going to be aversive to them, but it will send the message. But if you're going to use I feel statements to try to get your children to change, you're just making them responsible for your feelings. And then, of course, the simplest and least harmful example is when you're trying to get your children to eat their vegetables, and I've used this example hundreds of times. Right? It's okay to say, if you eat all your vegetables, you can have a scoop of ice cream for dessert. The problem comes in when you say to your daughter, as I have many times, okay, Olivia, you want to eat your vegetables? Remember, it's chocolate chip ice cream. It's your favorite. All the more for me. Okay, if you're not... Olivia, one more bite. Olivia, 2 more bites. Just try it. Olivia, try it. Right? That process is me trying to control her instead of just saying, okay, you can't have dessert, and next time you want to eat, it's going to be something healthy. And that's going to be the boundary. So, again, they're simple examples, oversimplified, I'm sure, and they vary in range of severity, but it's learning to be in that kind of relationship with our children and their behaviors that I'm talking about. Focusing on yourself is the best way to positively impact your child's life. That's it. That's the simple thing. That could be this whole slide. Go to the parent groups, go to the parent meetings, go to the Al-Anons, come out to the parent intensive if you can. Do whatever, read books, watch webinars. You're doing that. We have a large group tonight. So it's a testament to the work that you're doing. Make it your work. And you don't have to be solved and have the end of it right in front of you. You can just say, I just know that that's my work. I just know that that's my work. And it will change. It will change the relationship. I promise you. Your child will feel a shift. They'll feel the pressure come off of them a little bit. Doesn't mean it's going to make them do something different, but it will change it. Absolutely. It will be more optimal for them. So the best thing that you can do, that you can all do, when I get to the end slides tonight, the best thing that you can do is pay attention and work at all those things that we're going to be talking about during those announcement slides tonight. Remember that your hope and all your emotions, for that matter, are your responsibility. If you're hopeless, you might be focusing on the wrong thing. And I'm not saying that watching our children suffer is going to be painless. I'm not saying that watching them struggle and running into a wall and have some at times very, very negative outcomes is going to be painful. But fundamentally, foundationally, your life is your responsibility, not theirs. Be wary of parenting using emotions from unchecked, unfiltered emotions. That's that intrapsychic process. That's what I think it was the last webinar I did on communication talks and teaches about. That's why there's intrinsic value in the communication model, not just communication value, but processing value. And like Daniel Siegel talks about in the book Parenting from the Inside Out, parents who make sense out of their own lives form healthier and stronger attachments with their children. Write and work your own relapse prevention plan. How often when I hear the phrase, the term, relapse prevention plan, how often is a parent talking about their own instead of their child's? It's very rare, right? Because what do we have to do with it? Because I'm not the cause of it, right? Working on your relapse prevention plan is one of the best things that you can do to help your child. Know your triggers, know your common pitfalls. Sometimes I would have children and parents exchange letters about these are the things that I think you're not so good at. These are the things that I think you need help with. These are the things that it's hard for me to be your child. So that not as a course of blame, but just to start to say, okay, these are the things I can work on. Read, like I said, meetings, therapy, webinar communication, practice it, learning your intentions and listening. Reactiveness, anger, anxiety, and obsessing are warning signs that you are not focusing on your side of the street. And learn to ask and learn to allow yourself to be asked tough questions. Why questions? Don't focus on what you do, but focus on why you're doing it. That's much more important to this process than anything. Quite commonly, at the end of a presentation on communication and consequences, a parent will say to me, but I think I've done all this. I'm not perfect, but I've done all of this, and none of it worked. So let's explore this question. What if you do everything right and it still doesn't work? It is critical to remember that it is not about you. Healthy parenting is its own reward. It creates a better life for you and your family. And as I've said, being a healthier parent means being a better mother, father, brother, sister, and friend, and better person. This is the goal of healthy parenting, to be the best parent and human being that you can be. The trick is to let go of the idea of holding yourself responsible for your children while still holding yourself responsible for what you do. So that's the information for this evening. I'm happy to take, any topic-related questions. And thanks for joining us. We have a really good group tonight. No questions. Well, I'm going to go toward the end. I'm going to go over these slides, and then I'm going to go toward the end. Here's the book. It's on Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com. It's on Kindle, audiobook, or you can download it digitally from Audible.com or on Amazon from Audible.com. These are the workshops that I was talking about. Our Try to Parent workshop we want every parent to go to. We have a parenting intensive that I'm going to be hosting on June 25th. We still have openings for that, so if you want to do deeper work and really get into it, an amazing process, come out to the parenting intensive. And then we have a family intensive, which is a 6-day intensive in July. Actually, that's the wrong date. It's the week following that. I apologize. I should have changed that, Stephanie. I apologize. But it is the 20th, July 20th to July 25th, 6 days. So these are the kinds of things that you can do. Different levels. The Entrada workshop is a lot more psychoeducational and not as much in-depth personal therapy. The parenting intensives and the family intensives are much deeper personal work. Then we have our pursuits trips, our young adult trips we will do all throughout the year. So if you want to find out about those, go to our website. They're good, sober fun, good refresher course, good reboot. Here are our parent support groups coming up. The 10th of this week, June 10th in Los Angeles. Then I'll be in Philadelphia, Boston, New York. So we'll be out there. I don't know if we're going to hold Boston. We don't have a lot of RSVPs for Boston, so we'll try to get enough people to make it worth it. But we have good groups for Philadelphia and New York. And then the Bay Area, I will be in next month with Jen. Notice the different email addresses there to respond to. Some of them are to Stephanie@evoketherapy.com, and some of them are directly to Jen Graham at 49jennifer@live.com. We want all parents to attend 6 groups while their child is with us. Don't wait Start as soon as possible. Don't wait till the end. Follow us on social media to hear about announcements, inspiring stories, to have announcements for new blogs. And then our Parent Alumni Foundation page, 10% goes to children who can't and families who can't afford treatment. The next webinar, also one of my very favorites, in fact, one of my very favorite books, top 3 self-help books for me is the book The Dance of Anger by Harriet Lerner. That'll be Healthy Emotional Boundaries, and I'll be doing that this Wednesday, June 10th at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. So I look forward to rebroadcasting that. All right, Stephanie, any questions come up since I paused and gave you some time? Gave them some time? Why does the impact letter talk about the emotions we feel as parents? It's a good question. I redid the impact letter webinar recently. I think it's okay to talk about them. I think it's okay to acknowledge them. I think that those kinds of expressions can inform your child, can cause your child. They ideally lead your child to ask themselves questions. Just the difference between. It's probably the difference in intensity, right? It's the difference between making it about your feelings and sharing your feelings so your child understands what's going on in their lives and how they've lost contact. I will make this person who asked this a question. I've said this before. I will commit to rewrite the impact letter instructions to make that more clear this week. So that I get that question a lot. That's why I redid the impact letter webinar, but I need to follow it up, and I will do that. I give you my word, I'll do it this week. Redo the impact letter instructions. Because it's not clear, I don't think. So if you're watching this in the archives after June 15th, 2015, it's been rewritten. Stephanie, it went, there you go. How is setting boundaries and enforcing consequences not equal to control of my household? Meaning especially in the post-evoke environment home. Again, it's okay to set boundaries. And the people always ask me, where should my limits be? And I think limits always start with healthy boundaries. It's okay to say, I need this for me. This is what I feel good about. This is what I want. This is what I want our house to be like, right? These are the boundaries that I'm going to set. The way that I'm using controlling is that there's simply an emotional coerciveness to it instead of a healthy boundary and limit, right? That there's this emotional overlap between what I feel and what you're supposed to feel, between what I feel and how you're supposed to respond to me. So there's a connection. They're not completely disconnected, but there's also a separateness to this idea, right? The woman, for example, using a cliche, the woman who says to her husband, who's an alcoholic, I'm leaving you, I'm taking the children, I'm tired of the physical abuse, to the crazy behavior, to the yelling. She's not doing that to try to get her husband to stop drinking. She's trying to do that to provide a healthy environment for her and for her children. I know that's a cliche, so forgive me, but that's the difference. And when her husband says, I'll quit this time, she doesn't say, okay. She says, it doesn't matter. I'm done. And if he quits and they reconcile at some later date, that's a different story in this cliche example, right? So the difference is I am taking healthy steps in my life and in the lives of my children and in the lives of my relationship with my spouse. I'm doing those things because they're the right thing for me to do. They're the healthiest thing for me to do. But I'm not trying to control the universe. And I realize at any given moment, anyone in this equation outside of me can react in a way that I don't want them to. But I'm still going to do it because it's the right thing for me to do. And in the end, yeah, do I shape my environment? Absolutely. Do I create a life for myself that's better and healthier? Absolutely. But it's not by trying to get everybody else to change. So it's where our focus, where our attention is in the equation. And again, it feels differently when a parent talks about you need to stop smoking pot because it's unhealthy for you, to I can't have that in my life. I can't participate. I can't have that in our home. I can't deal with that. I'm not okay with that. It's not healthy for me. There's a difference there, and the child feels it. And if it's real and it's deep, it changes the relationship significantly. It's not a discussion of you need to stop yelling, you have an anger problem. It's a discussion of I can't have yelling in my life. I don't want to be talked to that way. So those are the differences. All right, folks, thanks for joining us this evening. Hope that these points of contact, even for some of you, re-watching these again, these newer versions of them, hope that these things are helpful. And the next one, I will talk to you Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. Mountain Time on one of my favorite books, The Dance of Anger by Harriet Lerner. Look forward to broadcasting that. Take care. Good night, and talk to you on Wednesday. Bye-bye.